as I stand here, I look at Sister Paulina, Sister Stella, who read our text about how we're all one, and those are lessons I had to learn. Sister Ade, I don't see Pastor Emmanuel Osei, but I think he's here. Yes, Pastor Osei. They go back to my time in Ghana, a long time ago, 1970 to 74. That's when I was at Bekwai. So the reading that we're all one is something I needed to learn. I grew up in California. My father was a Seabee, did construction. He was in a submarine off of Port Hueneme. My mother actually was born here in Michigan. She was born in a house off the Pawpaw River and grew up here. But her mother died when she was 6, and she went to live with an uncle who was a pastor serving in Mexico. So she grew up in her uncle's home. And I grew up in California. And in 1963, when the Seventh-day Adventist Church asked if we would go to West Africa, they asked us if we would go to Ghana. And we said yes. But the Ghanaian government did not accept us. My husband had a degree in theology, but he had a master's degree in history and in English. And they were calling him to teach English at Bekwai. And the government said, there's no way this man who is a pastor is going to teach English at Bekwai. He's going to be a pastor. So they said no, and we went to Liberia. So the stories of the lessons that I learned started in Monrovia, Liberia. We had a 3-month-old daughter when we arrived in Monrovia. And even though I wrote this, I'm going to refer to it because I'm a little bit nervous. And so 2 of our children were born in Liberia. And later when we moved to Bekwai, we then went from there to Yili and then back to Ghana. But at Bekwai, our children went to school at the elementary school there. Sister Jeremy was the headmistress. And the first lesson that I learned, having grown up just as a kid in California, not having any idea of what even other countries look like, I found that people outside of North America knew more about America even than I did. So I had many lessons to learn, and the lessons I learned about life, I actually learned, I think, the most in Ghana. And because we left Liberia, it was very American. But when we got to Ghana, one of the first lessons I learned is that everyone's child is everyone's child. That's what Bekwai told me. 500 students, training college and high school, 40 families. The family next door to me, the mother had to stay in the dorm during the week because she was a teacher training student. So their children, Helena and Gifty Boating, they used to stay overnight with my girls, Jeannie and Annette, and they had a lot of fun, and they went to school. They took their discipline, too, when it came. But one afternoon, I really learned what my children were learning. Sister Dadsy came, and she said, I'd like to buy some of the peppers that your daughter's selling. I said, I have a garden. I don't have any peppers growing in my garden right now. She said, no, but your daughter came with a pan on her head, and she was selling peppers, and I would really like some more. So when the 4 girls came home, I said, okay, ladies, what have you been doing? And they said they found a house where the faculty family had moved out. The garden was ready to be harvested, so they harvested the garden. And the 4 girls put the pans on their head and went door to door selling the vegetables from that garden. So really, truly, I learned that everyone's child is everyone's child, because in the whole campus, people bought from my daughter with her pan on her head just like anyone else. And when we left Ghana in 1979, I've actually been back about 5 times. And people ask me in my hometown, I tell them I'm from Kokofu. So Kokofu is my hometown. I pay my town dues. I know that my tree sounds very Rofu, I started to say. My intonation is lost. I speak the elder's tree. Instead of saying I'm going to the hospital or I'm going to the doctor, I'll say Meko Yari Sabia. And people look at me, And I said, yeah, when you're sick, it's the place you go to get well, right? So the first experience I would like to share with you is after that, because even though I've returned to West Africa that many times, I have returned alone. And so what happened is, living overseas, I'm the oldest of 7 children. My late husband was the eldest of 6 children. But as we lived in West Africa, and you had to take 6 weeks on a ship, or you had to pay a lot of money and fly back and forth, so I missed, and my husband missed, many of our siblings' activities. But in 1979, we were actually in Ohio, and my brother was getting married in Dearborn, Michigan. So we decided that we were going to go. And so even though my eldest daughter was in the hospital, my husband, my son, my daughter, and I, we drove all the way from Columbus, Ohio, which now doesn't seem far, but it felt far then. We were driving to the wedding in Dearborn, and my second daughter leaned over from the back seat, and she looked at her father, and she says, "You're getting old." And he said, "But I'm only 40, and 40 is not that old." And she says, "Yeah, but I don't know what I would do if something happened to you or to someone close to me." And he said, "Well, I've been a pastor, I've been a teacher, I've done these different things." And they had this conversation. Excuse me. And the car got really quiet, and then the back right tire circled out. And we pulled over on the side of the freeway, and father and son walked to the nearest exit to see if they could find help, but the exit was too far. They came back, and ladies, never underestimate your ability. I'm the one that knows how to fix the car. And so he said, "You need to you're going to have to help." So we got out. I was reaching into the lug wrench to get the lug wrench from the trunk or the boot of the car, and a car came across 4 lanes and hit where we were standing. My son was 10, sitting on the hillside. My daughter, 13, had scooted over to the side. I had seen her, and the car hit. It hit my husband a second time, and he died there on that road. 1979. And what I know is, like I said, I wrote notes, but it's from my heart. So we were just a few miles. I think we were 8 miles. And so I called the bride's family to say we were not going to be able to make it. That's all. And I hung up so that they wouldn't spoil the wedding. And what I want to share with you is that faith hangs in the balance when you're suffering. It really does. And, that morning, my late husband and I had sat together at the hospital. The doctor said, "Your daughter will come home this week. I need to know that your home is ready for her." And my husband and I exchanged a look that said, "I love you." And then we told the doctor, yes, that we were ready for our daughter, that we loved each other, and we were ready. But that night, we had the car accident, and our lives were totally changed. My daughter ended up staying in the hospital. The doctor said it would be better for her while we were rebuilding our lives. And my son, 10 years old, he said he didn't want to talk. So about 3 weeks after the accident, I told my son, "I'm taking you to a pancake house." So I took him to the restaurant, and while he was eating, he looked up and he said to me, "God is lucky." I didn't say anything. And he said, "I have decided to be a Christian, but if God had taken both of my parents, I would not love him anymore." And he and I did not talk about this accident again until 3 years ago. 42 years after the accident, my son and I had a conversation about the accident. And this is why I'm sharing it with you today. he asked some questions about the accident, and then I told him what the police report read, that the police report said that your father was standing here, but actually I'm the one that was standing there because I had just come from something in the lug wrench in the trunk. And he said, and I said, but there was something strange. His shoe was on the floor, on the road beside me. And he says, I know. And I said, you know? He said, yes. He said, when the car was coming, Daddy reached over and went like this and pushed you back. So the car did not hit me, it hit him. My late husband, actually, I didn't know that until 3 years ago, when he shared with me that actually, and I suspected that my husband had saved my life. This final act of love was a witness to his son. And did we have a perfect marriage? No. Those of you who know us at Bekwai, sometimes we didn't. He didn't want me to take the projector and go to Monroe, I get mixed up, I'm sorry. Anyway, to go to I'm sorry. We were supposed to go to the West Africa College from Bekwai, and we were supposed to go and put on a temperance program. In fact, your speaker next week was one of the stars in that play. And a lady had come and said she wanted to use the projector, and my husband told me I had to take it out of the car, and I said no. And I can tell you, 17 and a half years of marriage, I really only did that twice. Once was in Canada when I wore jeans to a picnic. Can you imagine? I never wore slacks. My husband did not wish that. I was a pastor's wife. But the students saw me ride a bicycle in a skirt. I didn't put this in my notes, by the way. They saw me play with my kids. They do everything. I never wore slacks or of any kind because in Ghana, it was not allowed. And I just never did. And these girls, 150 girls, saved money and bought a pair of jeans embroidered 76 on one pocket and JB on the other pocket. And I was like, I don't know how I can go and not wear them. So I wore them, and he didn't go to the picnic. So what I'm saying to you is that husbands and wives have differences, and they do have times when things don't go well. But did we love each other? Yes. And that very morning, we said that we loved each other. And that evening, when he lost his life, I have chosen to remember the positive memories. And I would recommend to each of us that we remember the positive memories. And I think like the woman of Shunem, we need to respond even, I don't know if you know the story, 2 Kings chapter 4. Her husband was working. She was home taking care of their son. When he got back from the field, because the father sent him home, he was about 10 years old. He had a fever. He actually stopped breathing. Her son stopped breathing. And she told someone to go tell her husband, I'm taking our son to see the prophet. And the answer, when he asked why, she said, it shall be well. It's really hard when things are not going well to say, it shall be well. But the woman of Shunem is a good example for us. And people ask me, how can you make decisions at a time like this? How can you cope? Your daughter's in the hospital, your husband died on the road, and I have shared these personal testimonies with this congregation. I think 2012, I spoke in the church here, and so I won't go through all of that. But what I want to tell you is that Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And it is through Jesus that we have success, the only way. Desire of Ages, Ellen White says God would speak his mysteries to us personally. And Isaiah 43, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When there's a storm, I am with you. All we need to do is acknowledge his presence. Mark 4 talks about the disciples being with Jesus. And the storm came and they forgot Jesus was right there in the ship with them. And he saved them. And we cannot forget that Jesus is in our ship with us. After going back through the Bible after that accident and looking again at promises, I decided that some of the promises are for me and some of them aren't. I don't know if you've had that experience to read the Bible and say, That's not how it is. For instance, the Israelite women, I'm sure they like shoes just like we like shoes. I can't even wear high heels anymore because of my age, but I like shoes. But the Israelites were told their shoes would not wear out. 40 years, their shoes did not wear out. Well, my shoes wear out. So how does that promise affect me? The promises in the Bible are kept by God to the people he gave them to. And he gave us promises that we can claim as well. And yes, it's come up and I can share with you, okay? And that is that I am aging. I'm actually older than Sister Paulina. And I need to hold on to the positive memories, just like the years that we spent in Ghana and in West Africa. Because those memories are what will take you through the trouble and the sea storms and all that come into our lives. It will. And if we can remember those promises, remember the good times, as I look back of 17 and a half years of marriage, I look at the good things, the pleasant things, the things that are good memories. And if you think about it, I also didn't write this, but I want to share with you. I recently shared with another church the perfume feet. When Jesus was with that meal and Mary put perfume on his feet and his hair, when he was hanging on the cross, not so long after that, can you imagine 6 hours hanging on the cross? And Jesus only spoke 7 times, very few words. I'm sure that the scent of the perfume that Jesus put on his feet and his hair stayed with him. The perfume of the memories of all the men and women who had touched his life, those memories took him through those 6 hours on the cross. I did some study about people who actually die, being burned, martyrs, and what keeps them alive is the memories, the good memories. So when I think about husbands and wives and families and children, we're all imperfect. We all make mistakes. Let's remember the pleasant memories. Let's remember the pleasant perfume that life has given us. And that brings me to the topic. I know it's not that long, but the topic for today is from the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, and they asked us to talk about abuse. Well, I would like to suggest that we talk about sweet endings instead of abuse, sweet swelling memories, that our relationships need to remember the good thoughts, the good times. And we will take a few moments to discuss caring for the elderly, and in the afternoon there will be other aspects of love shared by some experts in the field. I'm a pastor's wife. I'm an educator. I'm a teacher like Paulina. But there will be people who are there's a medical doctor coming, there's a psychologist, there is a counselor, there's a chaplain. They are the people who have been trained. What I share with you is from life experience. And so, okay, I wrote this, and I guess maybe I'll share it with you. And that is, when I came back, I've been living in Lebanon. I'm a volunteer professor, and I'm living in Lebanon, and I come back to the U.S., and I have a really sharp pain, and I'm not sure what that sharp pain is, and it doesn't go away. So I called my doctor in the morning, and he said, go to the triage at the emergency room in St. Joe Hospital in South Bend. So I get to the emergency room in South Bend, and the first triage, they talk with me, and they examine, and so on. And the doctor at the end of that meeting says, your diagnosis is elderly. Your diagnosis is elderly. I was like, elderly? I just came back flying from Lebanon. I'm a teacher. I'm not elderly. And the next triage showed what the pain was, and I just lived through it, and I didn't take any medicine because I didn't like the diagnosis. I'm not elderly, and that's not an appropriate diagnosis, okay? So I talked to my doctor, who had told me that I was abnormally healthy for a 70-year-old, that they told me my diagnosis was elderly. And he said that there are a lot in Michigan and Indiana. This is real. This is where we live. That in Michigan and Indiana, there are many older people who choose to live in their homes. A spouse dies, they stay in the house, they're home alone, they have a little pain, but really they're lonely, and so they go to the emergency room to have somebody to talk to. So they decided that if you're a certain age, after that age, you will always be diagnosed as elderly first. I'm sorry. So I went through the general conference slides. They sent 18 slides for this sermon. I am not going to share the 18 slides, and I'm not going to share to look for bruises, to look for this, to do that. I lived in Ghana too long to believe that. The elderly in the Ghanaian culture, the Asante culture in particular, elderly are respected. Look at the life that Sister Pauline shared with us. I have not seen elder disrespect or inappropriate care all the years. I've been back to West Africa 5 times. I pay my town dues. I go to Kokopu. So I can tell you it hasn't changed. Elderly in our culture, in the culture of Ghana and the Asantes, they respect older people. So for us, what I think we need to remember is that there are texts that prepare us, to love the elderly. So the text that was shared in the GC slide was, even to your old age, I will be the same. And even in your graying years, I will bear you. I have done it, and I will carry you, and I will bear you, and I will deliver you. This is from God to each of us, whether we're young or old. But the next text on the slide from the GC, it says, this is advice for those who are caring for the elderly. It's Leviticus 19. You shall rise up before the gray-headed and honor the aged. You shall revere your God. I am the Lord. And in Ephesians, it says, honor your father and mother. And that's for you, young people, and even for us, if our mothers and fathers are living, that we should honor them. It's the first commandment with a promise, and if we keep it, it will be well with us, and we may live long on the earth. The third and final text that was given for advice for caring for the elderly was Deuteronomy chapter 5. It says, honor your mother and your father as the Lord your God has commanded you, that your days may be prolonged and it may go with you well in the land which the Lord gives you. Now the General Conference had a final message and a final slide. It says, if anyone, this is 1 Timothy chapter 5, if anyone does not provide for his own, especially for those of his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. That was the message from the General Conference. And like I said, I know that the Asante, we have knowledge of God and God's Word. Sometime I would like to come back and maybe even share with you what I have learned from visiting Jamaica, the Osei Tutu's visit in 1711 when he was captured and taken, his whole retinue, the royal family. Much of what I learned has been from, Kofi Ntijami. Dr. Kofi Ntijami, the late Kofi Ntijami, was a dentist. And many years ago, my late husband and I went to his church, Elder Flagg's church in Detroit. There were 500 or more people present. And like I said, my husband and I had a very open relationship, and we talked, and I said, you see all these people? That man down there is a Ghanaian. Out of 500 people, and my husband said, please don't embarrass me. I said, I won't embarrass you, but when the service is over, I'm going to speak Tree to him, and if he answers, I am going to talk. And so I spoke Tree, and he spoke Tree, and he asked me to go back to Ghana. Yes, he was a Ghanaian. He said, I want you to go back to Ghana, I want you to go to Kokofu, and I want you to meet my family, and I want you to convert them. And I said, I am so sorry. I don't convert anyone. Conversion comes from God. I will go and greet them. So I go to Kokofu with my 3 children, and we're not knocking, we say, paw, 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 we don't really knock. So I'm stopping by houses, and I'm looking for the lady whose name he gave me. By the way, Nanaya Acha. And so I'm looking for Nanaya Acha. And you noticed in the bulletin they listed my name, Nanaya Acha II, because I eventually was adopted into that home. It turns out I was going door to door looking for the Queen Mother's house. I did not know it was the Queen Mother's home. And it was there that I really learned, about, sorry, I have so many notes that I'm not using here. But my grandfather in the family, Nana Isaac Adubobi, actually shared every week for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon the history of the Asante people, the Kwa language group, how the Israelites came down and intermarried with the nomadic tribes from Ethiopia, came across the Sudanic Strait, moved into Cote d'Ivoire, into Nigeria, into Ghana, and that the Kwa language group spoken by the Asante, the 3 tribes, the dialects that I used to be able to hear, how they had been believers in God. The name for Saturday is what? The name for Saturday, for the day. Yeah, and Minimini, it comes from the Hebrew language. And it's Miminidah is the day of the I Am. And there's a whole history with Auntie Mary Asarbiako's father was a little boy who learned that, and it's a long story that I'll share another time. But the first Seventh-day Adventist on the continent of Africa was in Asante, Ghana. And there's evidence and proof for that. So one day, I will share that with you. But Hebraic practices were very common among the Asantes when I lived there. And even I can see how you keep Sabbath here, that it is. And so we need to pray for wisdom, protection, and compassion for the elderly. But we need to learn from our own culture, from our own families, what our lives have been and how Adventism had its beginning in Ghana. I'm sure that clock is not correct because I can't even read it. But do I have time? I don't know what time it is. What? 12:53. Ay, ay, ay. Okay. Okay, let me leave this for another time and come to the closing text, which is John 14, 1-3. Okay? And, okay. I will try to take this very close. You've been listening, so I didn't even know how late it was. I'm sorry. Okay. There are 4 good reasons why we do not need to give up when suffering happens. And those are found in John 14, 1-3. And based on the text that Sister Stella read, where we are one, and you think about what Jesus said to them. He said, do not let your heart be troubled. And we don't have, our hearts do not be able to, and believe me, I'm skipping whole pages. You believe in God. That's the first reason. You believe in God. The second reason is that you believe in me. Jesus was talking about himself. And when I was in Kwahu at St. Peter's, there's, the Kwahu Mountains, the Kwahu Hill. I was studying up there. And one day, the teacher had to go to a funeral. And my teacher took that class. And anyway, the bottom line is, I spoke Tree from learning on the back of riding in the lorries from Bekwai to Kumasi. And so I knew enough that they told me that day I would not go to class, that I must go to a town in Kwahu and learn something I didn't know. I should see something that I think needs to be done and advise, come back and say, this is how you would take care of it. Well, the long story short of us, and I'm still on number 2, that you believe in Jesus, right? So I'm walking, I did my job, and I'm walking back to the hospital at Tibier, and I come into the forest, and there is the chief is sitting there, and there's a group of ladies that are dancing, and there's an activity going on, and I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, and I'm backing out. No, come back. And they asked me if I would dance with the ladies, and I said, no, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and I don't dance. And And the chief said, well, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And I was like, what? And so anyway, we had a very good visit. And during that visit, I learned about the foolish promise. Just raise your hand if you know Aquestia Boshe. Aquestia Boshe, the promise of the fool. So that day, I learned that the wedding ceremony in Ghana, in the Asante region, up in Kwahu area, they were still practicing it, and that is that you make the foolish promise. And again, I have a whole sermon on the foolish promise. But what I'd like to share with you very shortly today is that that young man who stands before the woman's family, the father looks at her and then looks at the young man, and he said, this young lady is our daughter. Do you promise whatever good comes to you because of her, that's for us, because she's our daughter? He says yes. And then, do you promise whatever bad comes to you because of this woman, she's your wife? You understand the implications. And Jesus was telling us in John 14, 1-3, that he is both the bridegroom for the male and the bridegroom for the female. He is our representative standing before the throne as the person who is our Savior. I'm skipping bunches of pages here. Okay, the third reason is there is a heaven. The fourth reason is the promise of Jesus' second coming. And we cannot lose faith because there is a Jesus, John 14, 1-3. And believe me, God has brought each one of us to where we are today. He will be with us. He will strengthen us. He offers us the water of life. And I think I need to skip more and just say, like the story of the woman of Shunem, we need to say, it shall be well. And we need to offer healing, love, and power of Jesus to others, not only the elderly. And I really appreciate what you did, Sister Pauline. That was amazing. But all of us will have storms in life. So we need to be reminded of the story that Mark tells in chapter 4 of the testimony of the storm. Jesus is with us. We must never forget. He is found in prayer. He is found in others. May the Lord help each one of us as we gather today. And especially, I appreciate Sister Stella reading such a long text, because Mark is writing about facing a storm, and each of us will and have faced storms. Ellen White says, and that's my closing, how often when tempests of temptation gather, we battle with the storm alone. We trust to our own strength till we're about ready to perish. And then we remember Jesus. If we call upon him to save us, we shall not cry in vain. He never fails to give the help we need. If we have the Savior in our hearts, there is no need for fear. The Redeemer will deliver us from danger in the way that he knows best. And may each one of us look to God. And again, I thank you.
Mrs. Bryson, we thank you so much. Thank you very, very much for coming to talk with them. You are one of us from Ghana and everything. This is your church. So anytime you come here, now you know that